Rock's January and February saw him in two build-ups at the same time, with the match against Ken Shamrock booked for WrestleMania 14, and the Farouk Nation split built throughout, with them teasing turning on each other, resulting in them accidentally costing the other his matches. The Rock Nation and Shamrock feud was involved in two peak segments during the month, with one of them doing a 3.9 rating to start Raw on January 26, with part of it being Raw's boosted interest coming off the Tyson debut angle a week earlier. Rock continued to establish himself as one of the top heels in the business, coming out to major heat on a weekly basis, with his pre-match promo and tag match with Farouk against Shamrock and Chains picking up over 900,000 viewers to a 3.6 rating. Shawn Michaels continued perhaps the biggest run of his career, with DX as the WWF champion heading into the most hyped WrestleMania since the previous boom period, with the triangle build-up of Michaels, Austin and Tyson dominating the shows and the edgy DX antics getting over, resulting in them doing a special announcement segment mocking the TV network complaints on the language used to start Raw on February 2nd. With Michaels and Hunter campaigning for an Austin vs. Tyson match to get Shawn out of defending the belt. Michaels and Austin started a series of angles to build the Mania main event, with the press conference footage on February 9th drawing Raw's peak 3.6 rating. Coming off the highest profile segment of his career to date, with a blitz of publicity not seen in years for the WWF, Steve Austin came out for the follow-up on January 26, challenging Mike Tyson to show up. A week later, Austin and Michaels started to shift the focus to set up their pay-per-view main event, with Raw starting with a 3.6 rating. 3 days later, on Thursday, in a hyped press conference coming in perfect timing for the WWF, with Mike Tyson making his first public appearance after being involved in one of the most publicized controversies in combat sports history, with the split from promoter Don King, the match was officially announced, with footage of it shown the following Monday doing a peak 3.6 rating, on a Raw that also included a show-long angle of Austin stealing Michaels' belt. The build-up to the Outlaws vs. Foley and Funk Mania tag match went to the next level, with one of the most talked-about angles of the year on February 2nd. Starting with a Funk vs. Cactus Jack hardcore match drawing a 3.9 rating, the Outlaws came out for the finish, pushing both off the stage in a dumpster in a segment that was sold on TV as a shoot injury, in the process elevating Road Dogg and Billy Gunn, with the scene of Foley and Funk in the ambulance drawing a peak 4 rating. Raw's highest opposed quarter during the month. Foley and Funk vs. the Outlaws' other big number of the month came a week before in a hardcore tag match, jumping over 600,000 viewers to a 3.8 rating. With Goldberg's reactions growing by the week with every match, the question of him breaking through to a main event spot turned from an if to a when. Goldberg's crowd reaction in the buildings also started to translate to business, as the company started promoting his matches during the head-to-head hours with Raw, bumping Nitro over 300,000 viewers to a near-peak 5 rating in a match against Mark Starr on February 2nd, while his most talked-about match of the month happened a week later against Regal, which saw Regal attempting to sabotage it by sandbagging and no-selling, resulting in him getting fired shortly after, with the match gaining over 500,000 viewers to a 4.7 rating. After months of build-up, the Nash vs. Giant match saw an unexpected finish, with Giant landing on his neck from Nash's powerbomb that nearly resulted in serious injury, leading to the company playing off that and banning the move, with Nash fined and arrested every time he uses it, with the jackknife as a result getting more over than ever. Nash ended January in a match with Ray Traylor, which saw him arrested after using the move, while 2 weeks later he headlined Nitro in a tag titles match with Hall against the Steiner brothers, ending the month with Giant coming back to set up their next meeting the following week. Scott Hall was in the main event of 3 of the 4 shows during the month, starting on January 26 in a match with Lex Luger, then a tag titles match against the Steiners in the build to Scott turning heel to join the NWO, with Hall's biggest number coming on February 23 in a promoted main event title match against Sting, drawing a 5.1 rating, which turned into a segment to hype their match for the uncensored pay-per-view. Hall's other number saw him bumping WCW over 400,000 viewers to a 4.8 rating in a match against Jim Neidhart in a quarter, which also included Hall's promo with Dusty, going on at the same time of the follow-up of the Foley and Funk dumpster angle on Raw to a record combined audience of 8.8 rating. The build-up to the Sting vs. Hogan rematch at Super Brawl was in the final stages after drawing the biggest pay-per-view in company history at Starrcade '97, with the Sting NWO rivalry overlapping the in-house NWO issues of Savage and Hogan, as the company promoted one of the biggest matches in show history for the February 2 Nitro, with Sting wrestling only his second TV match in the last 18 months against Savage, drawing a peak 5.1 rating. A week later, with Luger out to confront the NWO, Sting came out for the save with Annette falling from the roof in the build-up to the pay-per-view, drawing a near-peak 4.8 rating, while a day after beating Hogan to win the title, new WCW champion Sting was promoted to defend the belt against Scott Hall to close out a month in the main event, doing another show-high 5.1. With more potential money matches than at any point since the peak of the 80s boom period and more leverage than any wrestler in history, Hulk Hogan entered contract negotiations with his WCW deal about to expire, leading to inevitable talks of a return to the WWF, with JR playing off the rumors, going as far as to tease Hogan appearing at the Rumble pay-per-view for a potential match with Mike Tyson at WrestleMania 14. With the build to the Hogan vs. Sting rematch continuing along with the start of the split of the NWO, WCW was hotter than ever, selling out stadiums for weekly Nitros and breaking viewership records almost on a weekly basis. Hogan's confrontation with Randy Savage and the NWO to air the issues in the group led to a record-breaking 5.3 rating on January 26. A week later, Hogan's promo to hype up the upcoming Sting and Savage matches saw another near-peak 5 rating, with the show overall setting an all-time opposed record with a 4.9, leading to the company looking to capitalize on the boosted interest and putting on one of the biggest matches in Nitro history the following week on February 9, with Hogan vs. Savage in the first NWO vs. NWO match, drawing another show-high 5.1 rating. With the NWO Family Problems feud catching fire with record crowds and viewership, Randy Savage vs. Hulk Hogan 10 years after setting records in the Mega Powers program, was again the hottest feud in the industry. Savage arrived to the building on January 26 in a separate car to the group's limousine that arrived earlier, going straight to the ring and calling out the entire NWO, with the heated confrontation picking up big with over 1.3 million viewers to a record-setting 5.3 rating, making it the highest-rated segment in Monday Night Wars history. Savage continued with big numbers throughout the month, being involved in all 4 peak segments of the night. February 2 saw him headline Nitro in a big main event against Sting, drawing a 5.1 rating, while a week later the company put on perhaps the hottest match in the business on TV with Savage vs Hogan gaining over 1 million viewers to another 5.1, as Savage and Hogan dominated TV throughout, setting up their cage match for Uncensored on February 23, with the only segment separating them in Savage's favor is the Sting match on February 2, ending the month with a 5.2 average rating. The Goldberg train of momentum rode on in March, with talks in the company already anticipating huge sales for Goldberg's first merchandise about to come out in the next month, while on TV his winning streak got into the 60s with him moving into upper card positions near the main event players. Goldberg started the month being placed in the crossover segment when Raw went on the air, drawing a 4.7 rating. March 23 saw him again near the top of the card just before the main event in a quick match against Renegade, doing a 4.2 rating, while his most talked about appearance of the month came on March 30 in Chicago, with him coming out to the United Center to perhaps the biggest reaction on the show in a match against Ray Traylor that popped the building throughout, jumping over 1 million viewers to a 4.4 rating. March 98 saw Rock establishing many of the elements and mannerisms that will later turn into iconic features of his character, including the first mention of the People's Elbow name on March 9 during a tag match with Farouk against Blackman and Shamrock to open Raw, with the program with Shamrock heating up 8 days later on a special Tuesday Raw with Rock laying him out with one of the memorable chair shots in history. Rock was part of 2 major peak segments which got Raw 2 rare quarter-hour victories, with the first being on the go-home segment for WrestleMania 14 in the first ever main event against Tyson, jumping over 900,000 viewers to a show-high 4.2 rating, while a week later on the day after the pay-per-view, months of build-up culminated in the nation turning on Farouk with Rock's signal to take over the group, as the turn segment drew the joint peak of the show 4.3 rating to beat Nitro's 3.8 opposite. The end of Shawn Michaels' original career run couldn't have come at a more unfortunate timing professionally, as his final month was perhaps his biggest ever in terms of drawing and performance, with the company about to enter the hottest period in its history. Michaels started the month in one of the highest profile segments on Raw to date, with DX opening the hyped Raw on March 2 with Michaels promising to confront Tyson later in the show, as the Michaels-Tyson confrontation ending up with Tyson being revealed as the new member of DX, saw the show jumping to a 4.5 rating, Raw's highest rated opposed segment to date. The following week Michaels was on location cutting a promo that jumped over 300,000 viewers to a 3.7 rating on Austin being just another opponent, as he's not laying down for anybody, closing his run with the final selling promo for the WrestleMania 14 main event on March 23 with another 3.7 rating alongside Tyson, Hunter and Chyna, with the company moving on the following week with Sean Waltman debuting on Raw in a shoot promo on Hogan and Bischoff to join DX. With 3 tiers of established stars, Page continued to climb towards main event opportunities in the middle of the deepest talent roster in history, being involved in a triangle program against Raven and Chris Benoit as the US champion, while getting mainstream exposure with him and Raven shooting an angle on MTV to hype up their pay-per-view match at Uncensored. Page teamed up with Benoit on March 9 in a tag match against Raven and Saturn that gained over 400,000 viewers to a 5.1 rating, while his biggest ever number came on March 23 in one of the highest profile matches of his career to date, with his first shot at the title against Sting, drawing a near record 5.4 rating. Steve Austin's status was rising by the week, on the way to winning his first title at WrestleMania on March 29, taking things up the level and intensity of the expected Vince McMahon program happening in the middle of the Michaels-Tyson build-up. Austin set several personal ratings records on March, with him arriving almost an hour into the show on March 9 and going straight to the ring, calling out McMahon, taking Raw hostage, saying that he was gonna stay for the entire 2 hours of Raw until he comes out, as the Austin-McMahon confrontation ended up jumping around 1 million viewers to a 4.3 rating, Austin's highest ever opposed segment. Austin opened Raw 6 days from the biggest match of his career to date for the final selling promo, with Vince booking him to wrestle on the show in the first ever Austin vs. Rock televised main event, as the match, in a sign of things to come, gained over 900,000 viewers to a peak 4.2 rating, which beat WCW's 3.9, making it the first time Raw won the main event quarter in almost a year. A week later, in Austin's first show as WWF champion, the Austin-McMahon program officially started, with their opening segment drawing a joint peak 4.3 rating. With the Michaels vs. Austin program set to end at WrestleMania with no rematches for the foreseeable future, the company set the stage for the day after the show in the background storyline that was going on in the past 6 months, with Vince McMahon officially becoming one of the most prominent TV performers in the company to kick off the Austin feud. While McMahon proved to be a strong viewership draw since Montreal in November due to the legit curiosity coming out of it, the result coming from March 98 wrote the TV direction going forward, with McMahon's segments with Austin and Michaels doing some of the highest numbers in Raw history. Vince introduced Mike Tyson on March 2 for his second advertised appearance in a confrontation with Shawn Michaels, drawing a record opposed 4.5 rating. A week later, Austin called out McMahon to the ring, challenging him to take the first shot, with the segment picking up around 1 million viewers to another peak 4.3 rating, with Vince kicking off Raw a day after WrestleMania, debuting the new WWF Attitude Belt in a show-long angle with Austin that led to him being arrested, to officially start the program with another show-high 4.3 on March 30. Randy Savage, in a tweener role going against top heels Hogan and Bischoff but still as part of the NWO, opened the first head-to-head segment on the most hyped week in the Monday Night Wars to date on March 2, setting up the main event of Savage and Sting teaming up against Hall and Hogan, with the match doing a show-high 5.3 rating. Savage faced Hogan in a 6-man tag a week later, with the match drawing a record 5.7 rating in the final build to their cage match at Uncensored. The NWO split storyline continued for the rest of the month, with Savage headlining Nitro on March 23 against the returning Roddy Piper, while being involved in a tag match with Nash against Sting and Luger the following week. After months of build-up to the moment, with Nash constantly getting away while also dropping him on his neck in their last pay-per-view match, Giant finally got the upper hand on March 2 with him powerbombing Nash to a huge pop in a segment that jumped over 800,000 viewers to a 5.3 rating. The next 2 weeks saw them against each other, first with them facing off in a 6-man tag and then Giant facing Nash and Hogan in a handicap match drawing a 4.8 on March 23. With the main story in the background on and off screen being the legit heat between Nash and Hall to Hogan and Bischoff that escalated further, with Eric firing Sean Waltman, leading to them turning it into a worked shoot angle with a Hogan and Nash confrontation on March 30th to set up the start of the split to two NWO groups led by both, with Nash on the same night working a tag match that jumped around 1 million viewers to a near-peak 4.4 rating with Savage against Sting and Luger. Scott Hall wasn't on the list due to him taking time off mid-month for personal issues, with another one that only appeared on 2 shows due to management dispute and would have been on it otherwise being Ric Flair, with him doing big viewership gains with an average rating into the 5 range the first 2 weeks of March. After another big pay-per-view with Sting at Super Brawl, the Hogan vs. Savage feud that drove record viewership culminated in a cage match at Uncensored, drawing the second biggest pay-per-view in company history. While on TV, Hogan ended March with the joint highest rating average in the industry with the start of the build to another big money match against Nash. With rumors of the match potentially in the works if Hogan decides to jump back to the WWF. The intrigue in the business was to see the result of Hulk Hogan vs. Mike Tyson head-to-head on TV. While Hogan was outdrawing any segment that Raw put on the night, March 23 saw them going head-to-head at 10 p.m. with Tyson coming out with DX for the final Mania hype, while Hogan worked a handicap match with Nash against Giant at the same time, drawing a 4.8 rating to Raw's 3.7 with both shows jumping around 500,000 viewers. Hogan's other big numbers of the month included a 5.3 for a tag match with Hall against Sting and Savage, a record 5.7 rating for a 6-man tag with Hall and Nash, and another peak of the night 4.5 rating in the main event on March 30th against Roddy Piper. Sting continued his world title reign in a series of TV main events that set a new all-time record rating almost on a weekly basis, driven by the in-house NWO problems and him leading WCW as the main opposition. Sting came out to confront Savage on March 2 with him speaking for the first time in 18 months, setting up a tag match built as the first time WCW and NWO team up with Sting and Savage against Hogan and Hall, doing a peak 5.3 rating, while a week later Sting faced off against his uncensored pay-per-view challenger Scott Hall in a record-setting 6-man tag drawing a 5.7. Sting had perhaps his most memorable moment of the month on the unopposed Monday on March 16 with Raw airing on Tuesday, that saw him coming down from an helicopter to the main event of him and Luger against Hogan and Savage that shattered every record in cable TV history with a 6.6 rating, while on March 23 he defended the belt against Dallas Page in a match placed to start just as the WrestleMania Go Home Raw went on the air, with the Sting-Page match picking up big to a 5.4 rating, the highest rated opposed opening segment in history. The two biggest rising stars in the business had the same rating average throughout the month, continuing the road to main event spots, with Goldberg getting bigger by the week and Rock establishing himself as the leader of the nation. Rock started April in a match against Owen Hart weeks before joining the group, drawing a 4.5 rating, while at the same time continuing the feuds with Farouk and Shamrock along with the start of the program with DX. Goldberg's biggest number of the month was record-breaking, promoted in his first title match against Raven for the US belt. Goldberg vs. Raven was placed to start just as Raw went on the air on April 20th, going on to draw a big 5.7 rating, the highest rated opening segment in history. Undertaker, Kane and Paul Bearer's program was heating up further after WrestleMania 14, taken to the next level in a series of out-of-the-box angles to build to the first Inferno match between them for Unforgiven. The first 2 weeks of April saw Bearer hyping the reveal of Kane's father, while a week later Taker was at the cemetery to confront Kane and Bearer in a show-long angle that saw them driving the casket to the building, drawing the peak rating of the night 4.9 rating. The feud's other show high came on May 11th with Taker attacking Lawler after an interview with Bearer the previous week that saw Kane and Bearer coming out to confront Taker, drawing another 4.9. Roddy Piper was back full-time on TV in April to build to a tag match with Giant against Hogan and Nash at Spring Stampede, boosting numbers for every promo on the way to the match, with the biggest being the day after the pay-per-view, bumping Nitro to a 5 rating while announcing the main event title match of Savage vs. Hogan, closing May in a heated confrontation with Randy Savage and Bret Hart that jumped over 600,000 viewers to a 4.6 rating. Similar to most feuds in April '98, the WWF managed to make every WrestleMania feud hotter in the follow-up of the event, with Sable vs. Mark Marrow as one of the main ones, doing some of the highest numbers on every show throughout the month, including 3 peak segments of the night, the most in the WWF for April and May. The 3 big segments first saw Sable's promo hyping the Unforgiven match against Luna, doing a 4.9 rating on April 20th. A teased Sable vs. Marrow match on May 11th jumped over 300,000 viewers to another 4.9, while a Sable-Marrow segment which included a match against Farouk to set up Loser Leaves the Company match at Over the Edge on May 25th bumped draw to a 4.7. After months of heat between key head figures of the group, the NWO split was official, with Nash taking over the Wolfpack to cement himself as top opposition to Hogan. Weeks before it, with Scott Hall out with personal issues, Nash was starting his run as a singles headliner, finally getting his world title shot after 2 years, going against Sting in the main event on April 6, with the match jumping huge to a 5.8 rating. The highest opposed number in history, which saw WCW win its 83 week in a row exclusively on the back of the record rating, as Raw was leading with 15 minutes to go in the show. Nash's other peak number came on May 11th in an impromptu promo confrontation against Hogan that saw both taking legit shots at each other, drawing a 4.5 rating, ending the month recruiting both Luger and Sting to the Wolfpack on May 25th to massive crowd reaction. While Steve Austin was perhaps the WWF's most consistent viewership mover over the last year, April '98 was the month Austin officially went to the next level, with him established among the industry's top-tier TV stars and the WCW headliners. Austin, who up to that point was able to reach the ceiling of the WWF audience, broke through and attracted a significant percentage of the entire Monday night audience to his segments, with the 2 biggest numbers coming in the first 2 weeks of April. Coming out in a suit for a makeover as the new champion, Austin teased going corporate before turning on McMahon as the Raw viewership skyrocketed to its highest rated segment ever, drawing a 5.6 rating. A week later, after 2 hours of hype for a teased Austin vs. McMahon match, Raw finally won the night after almost 2 years on the back of a Monday Night Wars record 6 rating for the segment. Austin went into May feuding with McMahon's group along with headlining pay-per-views against Mick Foley, including a 4.7 rating for a main event tag with Vince against Rock and D'Lo on May 11th that saw Raw staying in the lead. After a strong performance in March, Vince McMahon dominated WWF television in April and May as the centerpiece character in opposition to Austin, proving to be one of the biggest drawing performers in the business with ratings breaking through to all-time heights. With Vince already being involved in Raw's two biggest opposed segments of all time in the last month, the results coming out of April surpassed anything reached before in show history. Vince's attempt of turning Austin corporate saw jump over 1.2 million viewers to a record 5.6 rating, a week later with McMahon promoted to wrestle in his first ever wrestling match with him shown all over the show in every segment on the way to the main event. Raw broke the 83-week losing streak as the McMahon-Austin confrontation bumped Raw over 1.5 million viewers to an all-time record 6 rating. Riding the momentum and interest, Vince continued to be featured heavily on every show along with Patterson and Briscoe, with him officially wrestling his first ever match on May 11th with Austin against D'Lo and Rock, coming over 2 hours after Eric Bischoff challenged him to a shoot fight on Nitro earlier in the night, closing May in a show-long angle of him being arrested by Austin and booking him against Taker in a promo that gained over 600,000 viewers to a 4.5 rating. Sting started April in 2 title matches against Nash in the TV main events, with the first one on April 6 and the first ever match between them saw WCW jump over 1.7 million viewers to an all-time record 5.8 rating. Sting's other peak segment came on May 25 after a show-long build to him potentially joining Lex Luger and the Wolfpack, with the main event of Sting and Luger against Giant and NWO Sting along with the post-match angle of Sting getting the red and black shirt, gaining over 900,000 viewers to a show-high 5 rating. Randy Savage had the joint highest rating average and the most viewers gained for his segments and matches than any other performer in the business during April and May '98, working through and delaying knee surgery due to the peaking business with him as one of the biggest driving forces behind it. Savage was building to a pay-per-view main event against Sting doing an injury angle on April 6 with a footage of the car attack hyped for the crossover segment at 9 p.m. drawing a 4.5 rating. Savage's biggest number of the month came on April 20, a day after winning the WCW title, as the main event on the night of Savage vs. Hogan shattered every record in Monday Night War's history, jumping huge with over 2.4 million viewers to an all-time high 6.5 rating. The next time Nitro was back on Monday night, it was Savage vs. Hogan again in the main event, with the company trying to regain lost momentum due to the TNT preemptions, as the match picked up over 900,000 viewers to a 4.4, ending May in a strong confrontation with Roddy Piper and Bret Hart to build the Great American Bash tag match that jumped over 600,000 viewers to a 4.6 rating. After months of negotiations with him driving WCW to all-time peak business along with the WWF closing the gap by the week to add to his leverage, Hulk Hogan signed the biggest money contract in wrestling history by the end of May, coming after having another strong month with record numbers on TV and pay-per-view. After only having short appearances on the first 2 shows of April, including losing to Raw in the second one, WCW plans to respond, putting on one of the biggest TV shows in company history with Hogan back in the main event against Randy Savage, as the match saw WCW taking back the lead and winning the quarter by its highest ever margin with an all-time record 6.5 rating, smashing the record 6 rating drawn by the Austin McMahon confrontation the previous week. The proven Hogan vs. Savage formula was back again on May 11th, doing a 4.4 rating in the main event rematch, with Hogan in a segment less than an hour earlier drawing the peak rating of the night for a confrontation with Nash that saw Giant joining NWO Hollywood, ending April and May on top of the list. took over as the leading NWO group in June '98, doing some of the highest merchandise numbers of all time, with the new red and black line selling out in every building for over 50% of the company's total merchandise sales. Nash, Sting and Luger were involved in several tag matches defending the tag belts, along with mostly promo segments to hype up the crowds to massive reactions. After 3 hours of hype for the decision, Sting joined the Wolfpack on June 1st, with the show closing segment picking up over 600,000 viewers to a show-high 4.3 rating. The next week saw them again in the main event spot, building up Page's decision to join, while on June 15th the full crew bumped WCW over 900,000 viewers for a promo issuing an open challenge, closing the month doing the peak rating of the night in a tag titles match of Sting and Luger against Bulldog and Neidhart, drawing a 4.3 rating. The Goldberg hype was cemented further in June as the industry's next megastar, with his first merchandise line doing huge numbers and the company placing him in the key drawing spots on television. Goldberg was put in the main event quarter for the first time on June 8, going over Chavo Guerrero in a minute, while a week later the highlights of Goldberg's 100th victory the previous night over Conan, along with Hennig and Roots promo to build the first Goldberg vs. Hennig match, did the peak of the night 4.6 rating. Goldberg was placed in the crossover segment at 9 p.m. on June 22 against Rick Fuller, leading to WCW opening with a 4.3 rating and beating Raw in the first head-to-head quarter for the first time in over 2 months, ending June in a match against Glacier that jumped over 800,000 viewers to a 4.1 rating. With WCW still not recovering from the lost momentum of the month of preemptions on TNT during April and May, Hulk Hogan's average along with WCW in general dropped significantly in June, but with hopes of building the numbers back up in the next month, with the company getting the most mainstream exposure in its history in the build to the Hogan and Rodman vs. Page and Malone tag match. The biggest media exposure came on June 8 with Hogan coming out with Rodman hours after he didn't show up for team practice in the middle of the NBA Finals, with Hogan appearing all over the show, including a confrontation with Savage and Piper, drawing a 4.3 rating. Hogan's biggest number of the month came on June 22 in a promo to hype up the Bash at the Beach tag match, gaining over 600,000 viewers to a peak 4.5 rating, with the footage from The Tonight Show an hour earlier also outdrawing Raw with a 4.3 to 3.8 margin. Randy Savage, who alongside Hogan has been the top drawing performer in the business for the first 5 months of the year, and Roddy Piper were both only made 3 appearances during the month in the build-up to the Great American Bash tag match against Hogan and Brett, continuing to draw some of the highest numbers on every show for their segments, with Savage officially written off TV for the rest of the year due to knee surgery, doing an injury angle after a main event cage match against Page, drawing a 4.4 rating on June 15. Rock's role during the month was limited due to him undergoing knee operation that took him out of the ring for 2 weeks. A week before it, Rock's elimination tag match with The Nation against DX drew the peak rating of the night with a 4.8 rating on June 1, with Rock returning in the King of the Ring qualifier match against Vader on June 15. A week later, in the co-main event of Raw, Rock vs. Triple H jumped over 700,000 viewers to a near-show high 4.5 rating, going head-to-head with another high-profile clash in the first-ever Bret Hart vs. Chris Benoit match on TNT, opposite doing a 4.2. Ken Shamrock got the biggest push of his career up to that point in a King of the Ring final win against Rock to win the tournament, with Shamrock's biggest drawing night on TV to date happening on June 29, the day after the pay-per-view. as his follow-up winning promo jumped 900,000 viewers to a 5.5 rating, while an hour later the second half of a Shamrock Cohen and Hunter match drew the second highest rated number on the record Raw rating, doing a big 5.6. The weeks prior saw Shamrock also bumping viewers for matches against Nation members Owen Henry and Kama to end the month with over a 2 million viewer gain. DX started June in a 6-man elimination tag against the Nation, gaining over 300,000 viewers to a show-high 4.8 rating. A week later DX were in New York in a series of skits to hype the opening of the SummerSlam tickets in the Garden, while their promo segment to set up a tag match with LOD and DOA picked up over 700,000 viewers to a 4.4. X-Pac and Triple H in the first DX vs DX match bumped Raw to a 4.4 rating on June 15, with both continuing to do strong numbers the following week, gaining over 1 million viewers in matches with Dustin Runnels and Rock, while Hunter was also in a three-way against Owen and Shamrock on June 29 that ended in a DX Nation brawl, doing a 5.6 rating. Undertaker arrived in Chicago on June 1 with two major segments on the night, first coming out and cutting a worked shoot promo on Vince McMahon about how he only wanted him to protect his hand-picked top guys, bumping Raw over 500,000 viewers to a 4.6 rating, while also main eventing the show an hour later in the #1 Contenders match against Kane, doing a 4.4. Taker was part of a big opening segment on June 15, drawing a 5 rating to continue the gradual build to the Taker, Kane and Austin program, while coming from under the ring to take out Paul Bearer in the main event Hell in a Cell tag match, drawing a 4.6, with him also involved in one of Raw's main angles of the night the following week as Taker broke into Bearer's house to attack him in his living room in a segment that drew a near show-high 4.5 rating. Vince McMahon continued to be as big of an influence on screen as he was off it during the month, starting on the first Raw of June in Chicago with 3 major segments all over the show, including confrontations with Mick Foley and Taker, and the main event commentary to close the show, picking up almost 1 million viewers throughout. The next week Raw was again built on McMahon with the main event segment featuring him getting a Humanitarian of the Year award, gaining over 700,000 viewers to the peak of the show 4.8 rating, as Vince continued to be perhaps the most featured character on TV, connecting everyone involved in the main event program with Austin, Taker, Kane, Bearer and Mankind. Kane's first show as WWF Champion on June 29 was also the highest-rated show in Monday Night Wars history with a 5.4 rating, coming a day after the King of the Ring pay-per-view with Mick Foley, who deserves major credit for the massive viewership boost on the night, coming off the curiosity of the all-time memorable Hell in a Cell bumps that turned into the talk of the industry. Kane and Paul Bearer's follow-up winning promo opened Raw with its highest-ever audience, doing a 5.4 rating, setting up the Kane vs Austin title rematch, drawing a big 5.9 rating in the main event. Kane and Mankind did strong numbers in the weeks leading up to it, with Kane main eventing Raw against Taker on June 1, a tag match against Austin and Taker on June 15 jumped over 300,000 viewers to a 4.6 rating, while a week later Mankind cut a promo hyping the career highlight Hell in a Cell against Taker, including a match with Billy Gunn, with Kane coming out minutes later to close the show in a segment with Austin, drawing a peak 4.7 rating. with his momentum building up in what seemed like a weekly basis, along with WCW struggling to regain its momentum after weeks out of its regular time slot and the WWF taking its TV formatting and storytelling to the next level. June '98 was the month Steve Austin took the place of the top drawing performer in the industry for the first time in his career, leading Raw to its biggest winning streak in Monday Night Wars history, with the show winning all 5 weeks during the month, including drawing the peak rating of the night in 4 of the 5 weeks. Austin started the month a day after a wild match with Mick Foley at the Over the Edge pay-per-view, coming out for commentary in the main event of Kane vs. Taker to set up Austin vs. Kane for King of the Ring. The next 3 weeks saw Austin in the build-up to the Kane match, first being attacked by him during McMahon's Humanitarian of the Year ceremony, drawing a peak 4.8 rating, while a week later Austin was involved in Raw's 2 biggest numbers of the night, first with the biggest opening segment in show history doing a 5 rating, and the main event Hell in a Cell doing a 4.6. Sable introduced Austin for his first appearance of the night at nearly 11 p.m. on June 22, ending up with him getting a bloodbath in the pay-per-view go-home segment doing another show-high 4.7, setting up Austin's biggest number of the month the following week. With huge boost of interest after King of the Ring, Austin challenged Kane for the rematch in Raw's highest ever opposed opening segment doing a 5.4. with the main event of Austin winning the title back from Kane after 24 hours, jumping over 800,000 viewers to a near-record 5.9 rating, Raw's second highest rated opposed segment only behind the Austin-McMahon confrontation on April 13, as Steve Austin ended with the highest rating average of his career to date, taking the top spot with a 5 rating. Undertaker and Austin's Highway to Hell build-up went to the next level, with Taker starting the month in one of the memorable swerves in Raw history, going over Mankind and revealing himself under the Kane mask to officially set up Taker vs. Austin 8 weeks from SummerSlam, as the match drew a 3.8 rating, facing strong competition from the Hogan-Goldberg match going on at the same time on TNT. Taker opened Raw in the next 2 weeks, first in a match against Vader drawing a 4.3 rating, while having 2 more segments on the night with McMahon and Austin, with the next week on July 20 starting with an Undertaker-McMahon confrontation that saw Vince questioning Taker on his partnership with Kane and him laying out the entire McMahon crew doing one of Raw's biggest openers in history with a 5.1, ending July with his biggest number of the month in a main event tag titles match with Austin against the Outlaws drawing a 6 rating. Vince McMahon opened Raw's second hour on July 6, announcing a 3-way of Taker, Kane and Mankind for the #1 contender at SummerSlam, picking up over 900,000 viewers to a 4.2 rating. Vince was involved in segments with Undertaker and Austin for the next 3 weeks, building up the triangle program of Taker, Austin and Kane on the way to Fully Loaded, with the biggest numbers coming on July 20th with a 5.1 to open the show with Taker and a 5.6 at the top of the hour with Austin, ending the month in a main event quarter segment drawing a 6 rating with Sable a day after Fully Loaded. The Wolfpack vs. NWO Hollywood feud was separated to 2 top single programs in July, with Nash and Hall starting their feud and Sting and Bret Hart building to their first ever televised match. The Wolfpack came out to a massive reaction in front of over 40,000 people in Atlanta, with Sting and Luger defending the tag belts in a quick match against the Flock doing a 5.3 rating, A week later was Nash and Luger defending the belts against Disco and Bright, picking up over 800,000 viewers, while on July 20 WCW planned to air a Nash worked shoot interview about Hall's personal issues, with him taking the tape to start a factions brawl in the crossover segment at 9 p.m. outside the building, continuing the angle 30 minutes later with a big tag titles match of Nash and Sting against Hall and Giant, gaining almost 1 million viewers in front of a mega-hot crowd at Salt Lake City, Utah, which was also the first Nash vs. Hall match in their Outsiders run, with both top programs involved in a Sting vs. Hall match the following week with interferences from Nash and Bret. The build-up to Fully Loaded continued with Kane and Mankind winning the tag titles against the Outlaws on July 13, gaining over 800,000 viewers to a peak 5.4 rating, with a rematch taking place an hour later with the added stipulation of Austin and Taker as special enforcers. Kane and Mankind were back in the main event the following week in a handicap match against Austin, drawing a big 6 rating in the pay-per-view go-home segment. Steve Austin continued his hot run on top with one of his biggest shows as a difference maker taking place on July 20, as Austin came out for a promo to start the second hour at 10 p.m. bumping Raw over 1.2 million viewers from a 4.4 to 5.6 rating for a confrontation with McMahon to set up Austin vs. Kane and Mankind for later tonight, while at the same time WCW dropped almost as many viewers as Raw gained during the segment to a 3.6. The Austin, Kane and Mankind handicap match in a loaded main event quarter jumped over 1.3 million viewers to a joint Raw record 6 rating, with Austin, Taker and McMahon opening Raw on July 27 for the pay-per-view follow-up to set up Austin and Taker defending the belts against the Outlaws, with the match ending up the third most watched opposed Raw quarter in history with another 6 rating. Austin's biggest numbers were at record levels and he would have been on pace to have his biggest month to date if it wasn't for segments during the first 2 weeks of July where he was going up against strong competition from WCW with Goldberg, Hall and Hogan matches which gained big at the same time. The X had the biggest month of their run to date in July '98 with them involved in all 4 peak segments on Raw during the month. DX's first segment was also perhaps their most memorable, with them doing a nation spoof in a segment that picked up over 600,000 viewers to a 4.8 rating. A week later it was the Outlaws defending the tag belts against Kane and Mankind, drawing a show-high 5.4 rating, with X-Pac involved in Raw's peak quarter the following week in a match against Rock, ending the month with another massive viewership gain throughout the night, first with X-Pac and Triple H in a 3-way with Rock doing a 5.3, and then the Outlaws against Austin and Taker doing a 6 rating, as the Outlaws and X-Pac ended the 4-week period with a 5 rating average and Triple H averaging 4.9, with the group combined bumping Raw almost 4 million viewers to their segment. With him off television since mid-March, while in the meantime Nash and Hogan were legitimately fighting on which one's group he joins, with the proven idea that whoever he stands alongside automatically appears a bigger star. Scott Hall returned big in July to give WCW a major boost of star power to the roster, and in particular giving NWO Hollywood the cool factor Hogan didn't want to give up to the Wolfpack. Starting in the first show of the month with WCW going all out for the hyped broadcast from the Georgia Dome, Hall worked his first televised match since March in the first Hall vs. Goldberg match, picking up big to a 3-month high 5.4 rating. Hall and Hogan opened the show next week, blaming each other for the losses to Goldberg, setting up the first ever Hall vs. Hogan match, drawing another show-high 5.4. July 20th saw a Wolfpack Hollywood angle leading to a parking lot brawl and a tag match of Hall and Giant against Nash and Sting, jumping over 900,000 viewers to a 4.4 rating, with Hall coming out an hour later for a promo with NWO Hollywood doing the show peak 4.6, closing the month in a match against Sting on July 27th, drawing a 5 rating. With his stock rising weekly since the start of the year, Rock had the biggest drawing month of his career so far, with the highest rating average in the WWF, coming at the same time of him starting to get mixed reactions from the crowds on the road and the TV tapings on the way to a potential turn and elevation to main event spot. Rock and the Nation responded to the DX imitation on July 13th, followed by a tag match of Rock and Owen against X-Pac and Hunter, jumping over 600,000 viewers to a 4.8 rating. A week later it was Rock vs. X-Pac in their first singles match, placed in a loaded commercial-free main event quarter, along with Austin vs. Kane and Mankind picking up over 1.3 million viewers to Raw's second most watched segment in history, with Raw a day after Rock and Hunter went 30 minutes at Fully Loaded on July 27th, featuring an IC title three-way match with Rock against Hunter and X-Pac, putting Raw back in the lead with a huge gain of over 1.8 million viewers, jumping from a 3.6 to 5.3 rating after WCW jumped almost 3 points ahead with the replay of the Bash at the Beach main event, as Rock ended with the highest average of his career along with a massive viewership gain. Bill Goldberg has officially arrived as a top-tier megastar in July '98, with him having the highest rating average in the industry during it. Goldberg started the month with one of the most hyped TV shows in business history built around him in front of the largest TV crowd of all time, with over 40,000 from the Georgia Dome, working 2 matches on the night, first against the returning Scott Hall, jumping over 800,000 viewers to WCW's highest rated segment in over 2 months with a 5.4 rating. An hour later Goldberg was back out for the main event in a first-time ever title match against Hulk Hogan, shattering every Monday Night Wars and cable TV record in history, picking up huge with almost 2 million viewers to an all-time peak 6.9 rating. The next week Goldberg was again in the main event with a title match against Curt Hennig, drawing the peak rating of the night with a 5.4. Goldberg was promoted for his first promo on July 27th, doing a 5 rating, along with him defending the belt against Bryan Adams later in the show, closing the month with a 5.4 rating average. On the back of the 2 highest-rated quarters in Monday Night Wars history, Hulk Hogan rebounded in July to take back the top spot with one of the biggest overall viewership gains in wrestling television history, along with him being involved in all 4 peak segments of the night for WCW during the month. Hogan started July playing a key role in moving the first Hogan vs. Goldberg match from the advertised dark match to the TV main event, with the match breaking all records, drawing a 6.9 rating, while at the same time beating Raw during the quarter with the highest margin in history of over 3 rating points. The next week WCW loaded up the final half hour, putting on the first Hogan vs. Hall match, followed by Goldberg vs. Hennig, with the Hogan-Hall match gaining over 1 million viewers to put WCW in the lead, growing from a 4.5 to a peak 5.4 rating, as the big viewership gains continued on July 20th with Hogan's promo with NWO Hollywood jumping another million viewers to a show-high 4.6. With Hogan's month starting with an all-time record number, July 27th saw him ending it by also adding the second most watched opposed quarter of all time, with WCW putting on the replay of the Hogan and Rodman vs. Page in the Lone Dash at the Beach tag match, leading to one of the biggest rating spikes in history, with the show jumping from a 4.2 to 6.5 rating within 15 minutes, as Hogan had perhaps his biggest drawing TV month to date in his WCW run. At the peak of their popularity as a group, the first tease of a DX split happened in the first 2 weeks of August, starting with an X-Pac vs. Triple H match for the #1 contender at Rock's IC title at SummerSlam, ending with Chyna interfering in Hunter's favor to set up a confrontation between all four members for the following week, with them shown arriving separately throughout Raw's first hour, ending up in a swerve of them revealing that the group is together, with the segment jumping over 900,000 viewers to a 4.8 rating. The summer-long DX Nation feud was heating up in the final build for the payoff at SummerSlam, having a street fight on August 17th drawing a near-peak 4.4 rating to put Raw in the lead for the first time on the night. After the last couple months of mostly staying in the background of NWO Hollywood, Bret Hart in a new character twist got the opportunity to carry segments on his own in angles with Booker and Dallas Page, along with the start of the program with Sting, cutting several subtle heel promos with the idea that he's on the way out of the NWO, while getting to showcase his strengths in long TV matches as U.S. champion. Bret was in the main event on August 3rd attempting to team up with Sting against Giant and Hall, while a week later on the show built as Night of Champions with every belt defended, Bret had his biggest number of the month, going 17 minutes in a U.S. title match against Lex Luger, gaining over 700,000 viewers to WCW's biggest quarter of the night, drawing a 5.1 rating. Bret was back near the main event in another title match against Page on August 17th, gaining viewers over 2 quarters from a 4.4 to 5.1, with him recruiting Stevie Ray to NWO Hollywood the following week after turning on Booker in a segment drawing a 4.9. Vince McMahon continued to be in the center of the top storyline heading into SummerSlam, opening the show in promo segments for 3 of the 4 weeks to set the stage for the rest of the show, with the main angle heading into the pay-per-view being Vince trying to reveal the Taker-Kane partnership. Vince came out at the top of the hour on August 3rd hyping the Highway to Hell build-up and booking Austin and Taker defending the belts against Rock and Owen, for later to bring them both out to the ring in a segment jumping big to a 5.7 rating, with McMahon confronting Mankind and Austin the next 2 weeks to set up the reveal of Taker and Kane in a promo on August 24th, with him involved in 2 segments later in the night, raising the cage to prevent Austin and Taker fighting before SummerSlam, and the overrun an hour later of him calling out Taker to ask if he's a friend or foe. Kane and Mankind started August in a tag match against the Outlaws in a SummerSlam preview, bumping Raw over 500,000 viewers to a 4.9 rating. Mankind opened the show on August 10th calling out McMahon, with Bearer and Kane following to set up the main event of them teaming in a Four Corners tag match doing the peak 5.2 rating, with their biggest match number of the month coming against each other on the Loaded Raw on August 24th with the first televised Hell in a Cell match, giving Raw the lead for the first time on the night against a record WCW audience in the violent match, gaining over 1.3 million viewers to a 5.3 rating. The feud between the two NWO groups continued on TV and escalated to new heights behind the scenes, with the heat between Nash and Hogan taken to the next level to the point where Nash refused to go out for a scheduled promo mid-show on August 3rd after the Wolfpack were booked to be attacked throughout the show with no response or comeback, as Nash claimed that Hogan is trying to sabotage the Wolfpack's popularity. On the same night, the main event saw a Wolfpack vs. Hollywood match with Hall and Giant against Sting and Luger, replaced by Brett, drawing a 4.2 rating, with Nash making his in-ring return the following week in a tag titles rematch of Nash and Sting against Hall and Giant, jumping over 400,000 viewers to a 4.8 rating, as both group returned to ringside moments later for the Goldberg vs. Main NWO Lumberjack match doing a 5.9 rating. Luger had strong viewership gains throughout the month in matches with Bret Hart and Bryan Adams, while Giant in a new partnership with Scott Hall had the biggest average rating of the two groups, being involved in big main events including a 6.3 on August 17th for a match against Goldberg, with the biggest NWO number of the month coming on August 24th with a main event of Nash and Goldberg against Hogan and Giant, drawing a near-record 6.5 rating. Rock's momentum was growing rapidly with every show in August heading into a career-elevating performance at SummerSlam, starting the month in the Raw main event of the first 2 weeks with Rock and Owen Hart teaming up to challenge Austin and Taker for the tag belts after winning a number 1 contenders match on the debut episode of Heat a day earlier, doing the peak 5.9 rating. A week later was Rock and D'Lo teaming up in a stacked Four Corners tag match, also drawing a show-high 5.2, with August 17th building to the final stage of the Nation DX program with a Factions street fight bumping Raw over 1.4 million viewers to a 4.4 rating, one of only 2 Raw segments on the night to outdraw WCW, ending the month in a major heat angle on the go-home show for SummerSlam, with Rock and the Nation locking DX backstage and coming out to confront Chyna in a segment that drew Raw's head-to-head peak 5.4 rating, and was again one of 2 Raw segments to win a quarter on the show, as Rock, with bigger mixed reactions by the week on the way to the upcoming turn, finished August having the most quarter-hour peak segments of the month in the WWF. After months of build-up to the moment, Undertaker and Kane finally revealed their partnership to open one of the most loaded Raw shows in history 6 days from SummerSlam on August 24th, with Taker leading Kane to turn on Bearer in the opening segment of the show, doing a 4.7 rating in Raw's biggest opening in over a month. Taker and Austin in the final stage of the Highway to Hell build-up defended the tag belts in the first 2 weeks of August, doing show highs 5.9 and 5.2 ratings, with the storyline in the background of Taker teaming with Kane continuing in Raw's main event segment on August 17th, with Kane dressed as Taker brawling with Austin while Taker himself drove him out of the building, leading to the payoff on August 24th to end one of the best pay-per-view build-ups of all time, with Taker and Kane setting the stage on fire with Austin near it to close the show, and the overrun going unopposed at over 11:03 p.m. drawing a 6.1 rating. Steve Austin opened August bumping Raw almost 3 million viewers throughout for his promo and main event match, first coming out at the top of the hour to confront Taker and McMahon, telling Taker that he can keep the tag belts as the WWF title is the only thing he wants, jumping over 1.3 million viewers to a 5.7 rating, with their tag title match against Rock and Owen less than an hour later gaining even bigger with over 1.6 million viewers to a 5.9. Austin and Taker lost the tag belts the following week in the main event Four Corners tag match, jumping over 900,000 viewers to a 5.2, with Austin opening Raw on August 17, driving a hearse into the arena, calling out Vince and hyping a confrontation with Taker for later in the show. With Raw in the final 2 weeks for SummerSlam, the company placed the final main event angles of Austin, Taker and Kane to start at over 11 p.m. into the overrun when WCW was already off the air, perhaps with the idea of wanting as many people as possible to watch the final sell for the pay-per-view and not go head-to-head with the big star-power WCW main events that were doing huge numbers. That led to Austin and Taker coming out 2 minutes after 11 with the segment going unopposed, gaining over a million viewers to a 5.4 rating. A week later, Austin responded to the Taker-Kane team by saying that he's gonna take one of them out tonight, leading to him attacking Kane during the Hell in a Cell, doing a 5.3, with the main event segment on the show again crossing into the overrun with the final Austin Taker-Kane angle going unopposed, picking up over 2.4 million viewers from the huge viewership of over 8 million viewers that WCW went off the air with to a 6.1 rating. Hulk Hogan established again in August '98 that he's still at the drawing top of wrestling television, while Hogan's numbers were boosted by being placed in hot segments throughout the month. No one in the industry when put in position to draw delivers bigger numbers than Hogan still does, having perhaps the biggest month for a wrestler in cable TV history with an all-time record viewership gain and the peak segment on the night on all 4 shows during the month. After back-and-forth exchanges on The Tonight Show and WCW TV, Hogan, Bischoff and Page shot the final angle for Road Wild, with Hogan and NWO Hollywood beating down Page in front of Kimberly in a segment gaining over 700,000 viewers to a peak 5 rating. A week later, Hogan and both NWO groups were at ringside for a lumberjack match in the main event, doing a 5.9 overrun, with Hogan's perhaps most memorable segment of the month taking place on August 17th, with Ultimate Warrior making his return to wrestling after over 2 years, confronting Hogan with a 12-minute promo to lead to one of the biggest rating jumps in history, picking up over 2.3 million viewers to a near-record 6.4 rating. Warrior also boosted numbers the following week, coming out to a massive reaction in the second highest rated quarter of the night, doing a 5.4 rating, with Hogan opening the show in the United Center to set up the main event of Hogan and Giant against Goldberg and Nash, doing another massive viewership gain from a 4.9 to 6.5 rating, which meant that even with the industry's 2 new megastars in Austin and Goldberg exploding in popularity over the last year, Hulk Hogan ended August '98 having the entire top 5 most watched segments in Monday Night War's history. A month into his title run, Bill Goldberg took center stage in August, headlining 3 out of the 4 shows to some of the highest numbers in history. Goldberg came out on August 3, 5 days from the Road Wild pay-per-view, calling out both groups of the NWO, with Sting coming out in the first Goldberg-Sting interaction on television. With the WWF strategically going a few minutes over 11 to gain massive unopposed viewership in the last month, WCW responded in August by going into overruns for their final segment of the show, with Goldberg's string of main events starting on August 10th and a title match against Meng placed to start almost already in the overrun, as the match going against a Big Star Power 4 Corners tag match on USA Network jumped over 1.3 million viewers to a 5.9 rating, with WCW going with a similar formula a week later, having the first ever Goldberg vs. Giant match starting just before the top of the hour, with the entrances and first minutes of the match jumping over 900,000 viewers, while the match itself gained further to a near record 6.3 rating with an over 2 million viewer gain. Goldberg's biggest number of the month came on August 24th, first with Nash calling him out to the ring after taking 2 spears in the last month, setting up Goldberg and Nash teaming against Hogan and Giant for the main event, with the match peaking at record levels, first jumping over 1.6 million viewers to the joint second highest rated segment in history, doing a 6.5 rating, while going a couple minutes over 11 p.m., which saw the finish of the match into the overrun, gaining over a million viewers more to a huge 7.4 rating, with the broadcast overall drawing WCW's highest ever opposed rating with a 5.2, as the Goldberg momentum continued, having the highest average rating in the industry with a massive 6.4. Following SummerSlam in the Garden, Rock's popularity skyrocketed with every week in September, while being placed in the main event spot for 2 out of the 3 shows. Rock's biggest 24 hours on the way to being further cemented as the business next megastar came on September 27th to 28, with the Breakdown pay-per-view crowd giving him the biggest ovation on the night, including one of the biggest reactions of the year for the double People's Elbow spot, while a day later in the 3-on-2 main event with Shamrock and Mankind, Rock pinned Taker clean in a match drawing a 4.3 rating and then going unopposed, jumping almost 2 million viewers to a peak 6.1. Shamrock's biggest number of the month came on September 14th with him challenging Austin for the WWF title, drawing Raw's peak 4.9 rating, while on the same night Rock faced Kane in a match gaining over 600,000 viewers to a 4.1, with Shamrock and Rock playing off the crowd reactions, going through a double turn during the month. The Wolfpack vs. Hollywood NWO feud continued in September, with the main focus placed on the build-up for the first Nash vs. Hall match in the Outsiders era, with Nash officially challenging Hall to the match at Halloween Havoc after a main event tag match with Luger and Ray as partners, drawing a show-high 4.2 rating. A week later Nash worked a match against Bryan Adams, gaining over 400,000 viewers, while Luger and Conan also having a quick tag match later in the show, both doing 3.7 quarters, with Luger involved in a match against Hall on September 14th doing a 4.8. The Scott Hall drinking angle went to the next level in September, playing off legit issues going on at the time, while adding over-the-top elements to distinguish it as a TV storyline. Hall came out with a drink for a match against Luger in September 14th in no condition to work, leading to a worked shoot follow-up with Bischoff, Luger and Nash breaking character to try to get Hall to the back, with the Hall vs. Luger match along with the intervention segment jumping over 900,000 viewers to a 4.8 rating. Hall was scheduled for a main event tag match against Nash and Luger a week later but went to the commentary table instead, until coming out to attack Nash and set up the Hall vs Nash pay-per-view match doing a peak 4.2, with Hall closing the month in a match against Billy Kidman jumping over 600,000 viewers to a 4.5 rating. Undertaker and Kane were unleashed by Vince on the entire roster in September after Taker didn't get the belt off Austin at SummerSlam, going on a rampage throughout the show with the main opposition against the three-way of Rock, Shamrock and Mankind. Kane and Taker both worked high-profile matches on the Loaded Raw show on September 14, with Kane against Rock drawing an hour-high 4.1 rating, while 30 minutes later a Taker vs Mankind hardcore match did a 4. Taker and Kane came out to open Raw as McMahon's protection on September 21, while an hour later worked a tag match against Austin and Billy Gunn doing a peak 5.1 rating, with their biggest number of the month coming a week later a day after the Breakdown pay-per-view with them turning on McMahon and breaking his leg following the Zamboni Chaos scene doing a 5.5. While also main eventing the show in a 3-on-2 handicap match against Rock, Shamrock and Mankind. With the 8-year-in-the-making rematch against Warrior officially booked more than a month in advance after Hogan made the challenge on September 14 and Warrior accepted in the same show an hour later, Hogan's role during the month was limited compared to his usual storylines, with him involved in only 3 advertised segments during the head-to-head period against Raw. A week after the match was said, WCW had a series of Warrior mind game angles including him kidnapping Hogan's disciple and setting his locker room on fire, with Hogan coming out for the response over 2 hours later at over 11 p.m. with Warrior revealing that disciple jumped to the OWN in the overrun segment doing a 4 rating. While that feud was going on, Bret Hart attempted to turn babyface saying that Hogan was responsible for everything he did in the last 5 months, setting up both Hogan and Hart's biggest number of the month in the main event on September 28 with the first ever match between them. The Hogan vs. Bret match, after over 2 hours of hype being promoted as one of the biggest matches in wrestling TV history, picked up a massive audience with over 1.8 million viewers to a peak 5.2 rating. The main storylines on WWF television on Raw and Heat were all building to Vince McMahon's master plan reveal on September 27, with him guaranteeing that Austin would lose the title after booking him in a 3-way against Kane and Taker to open the first Raw back on its regular time slot after 2 weeks out due to the US Open on the USA Network. One of Vince's biggest nights on TV to date took place on September 28 with him involved in all top 4 highest-rated opposed segments on the show, first coming out with Austin's costume skull title belt a day after the plan succeeded, opening Raw with its highest viewership in over 2 months doing a 4.7 rating, while 40 minutes later the start of McMahon's planned title ceremony already picked up 1 million viewers to a 4.8. Before jumping to a 5.5 with the Austin interruption and the McMahon-Austin confrontation to the parking lot, along with the follow-up of Taker and Kane breaking Vince's leg, maintaining a 4.8 rating. After the last 6 months of personal back-and-forth lawsuits along with years of personal and professional dispute, Ric Flair returned to WCW TV to reform the Horsemen on September 14 to one of the biggest ovations in history, before taking the microphone for one of the most anticipated promos of all time, with him cutting a shoot promo on Eric Bischoff to kick off their program, gaining big with over 1.5 million viewers to WCW's highest-rated quarter of the month, drawing a 5.4 rating. And a segment which Flair, due to the crowd reaction and the TV rating, called the biggest of his career. The reality-based feud continued the following week and perhaps taken even another step forward, with Flair and Bischoff going back and forth in an almost 20-minute unscripted shoot confrontation face-to-face in the ring for the first time, jumping over 1 million viewers to a peak 4.2 rating. Ending the month in a short segment to set up future angles, with Bischoff kicking the Horsemen out of the building, gaining over 400,000 viewers. Steve Austin had the most peak segments of any performer in the business in September '98, with him involved in all 3 of Raw's show-high numbers with big viewership gains throughout. Raw came back to Monday nights on September 14 after 2 weeks on Saturday, with the company looking to build back momentum, putting on one of the most loaded cards in show history, headlined by the first ever Austin vs. Shamrock match, jumping over 1.2 million viewers to a peak 4.9 rating, with Austin's tag match with Billy Gunn against Taker and Kane in the breakdown preview, spiked Raw over 1.4 million viewers to a 5.1. Austin's biggest number of the month also came in one of the most memorable segments of his career, a day after losing the belt, driving a Zamboni to the ring in the middle of the title ceremony to take out McMahon with a flying clothesline, which saw the segment gain over 1.7 million viewers in total to a 5.5 rating. The build-up to the first Sting vs. Bret Hart match was heating up, with several turns during the month, starting with Bret's babyface turn promo on September 14, on a night headlined by a hyped one of the biggest matches in wrestling TV history, with Sting challenging Goldberg for the WCW title, and the first match between them doing a peak 6.1 rating. A week later, Sting made the save for Bret against Scott and Bagwell in a segment jumping over 300,000 viewers, while on September 28, after Bret sold knee injury and was unable to continue his match against Hogan, Sting took his place and had the match won until Bret came back to the ring to turn heel back on Sting, with the match drawing a show-high 5.2 rating. Bill Goldberg headlined the first head-to-head Monday since August 24 on September 14, with Raw set to be headlined by an Austin vs. Shamrock title match. After the challenge on Heat a day earlier, WCW responded big, putting on the first ever Goldberg vs. Sting match against it head-to-head, starting at over 11 p.m. into the overrun against the second half of Austin vs. Shamrock, which saw WCW jump huge with around 2 million viewers to a peak 6.1 rating, while at the same time Raw dropped from a 4.9 to 4.1. With him getting massive media publicity due to being a Jewish wrestling heavyweight champion, Goldberg was off the show on September 21, allegedly due to the company not wanting him to appear on the Jewish New Year holiday on the same night. Goldberg's only real advertised appearance during the month was the Sting match, with the other one coming in different circumstances, as after Chris Jericho was taunting him in the last few weeks and promising a match against him, the announcers sarcastically hyped a Goldberg vs Jericho match with the idea that it's Jericho's Goldberg imposter, ending up with the real Goldberg coming out carrying him to the ring and taking out Jericho's crew, with the segment and Goldberg's appearance, while too short to make a significant difference in numbers, still picked up over 300,000 viewers to win its quarter with a 4 to 3.9 rating, one of only 2 WCW quarters to beat Raw on the night. With the Scott Steiner-Buff Bagwell partnership showing strong chemistry in the last few months after Scott established his heel character and Buff returned from neck injury, October '98 with Scott in a feud with brother Rick along with the involvement of Buff's mother Judy, saw the Steiner-Bagwell angles starting to translate big to the TV audience as a consistent viewership mover in one of the weekly featured segments on Monday nights. Scott and Buff started the month in a segment with Rick bringing out Judy Bagwell to confront Buff on his heel actions with Scott since rejoining the NWO, with this segment jumping around 1 million viewers to WCW's highest-rated quarter of the night with a 4.8 rating. The following week Steiner confronted Buff and Judy after Buff showed remorse a few days earlier on Thunder, with the segment jumping over 600,000 viewers to a 4.6 rating, with Scott opening the crossover segment on October 19th in the final hype promo for the Rick Havoc match, closing the month with him and Buff reuniting a day after the Swerve calling out and attacking J.J. Dillon in a segment drawing another 4.6. 3 weeks from the first one-on-one Outsiders match, the Wolfpack arrived in a Hummer limo going straight to NWO Hollywood's locker room, with Nash looking for Scott Hall in the wild opening segment, starting with WCW's highest opener in almost 2 months with a 4.6 rating, with Nash, Luger and Conan then driving after Hall to all the bars in the city, leading to the payoff segment of them eventually finding him to start a Nash Hall brawl all over the bar, drawing a 4.7. A week later Nash came out for a promo calling out Hall until he came out taunting Nash, to lead to a car chase outside the United Center doing a 4.3, with Hall and Nash hyped to face each other 6 days from the pay-per-view in a tag match on October 19th, ending up with Nash coming out with a drink and both Hall and Nash drinking and saluting each other from both sides of the ring until Nash's reveal of his empty cup, in a match jumping over 500,000 viewers to the peak quarter of the night 4.5 rating. The Havoc follow-up saw Hall coming into Nash's locker room to shake his hand until him and Giant put him through a wall, with Hall also working a Hollywood vs. Wolfpack tag match an hour later jumping over 300,000 viewers to a 4.6 rating. The Flair vs. Bischoff feud continued in October in a series of high-profile segments doing big viewership gains, with Bischoff attempting to keep Flair and the Horsemen off the show and out of buildings across the country. Bischoff started the month announcing to the crowd that Rick won't be there tonight, ending up with Arn Anderson bringing out another Flair and Rick's son Reed to take down Eric in the main event quarter, outdrawing Raw 4.7 to 4.4. A week later, Eric ordered a security team to not let Flair enter the United Center in Chicago, ending up with Flair arriving with building owner Bruce McArthur to lead to Eric being kicked out after a Bischoff-McArthur-Flair confrontation in the Skybox in a segment, jumping over 1.1 million viewers to a 4.6. October 19th from Minnesota's Target Center saw another high-profile crossover segment with the mayor of Minneapolis appearing to introduce Flair to the ring, leading to Eric coming out in a back-and-forth exchange with the mayor demanding Flair to leave the building, ending up with Eric again being forced to leave with his car being towed outside on the street in a segment, jumping over 600,000 viewers to a 4.3 rating. With Flair vs. Bischoff set as one of the headline matches at Starrcade, Rick's in-ring return was teased on October 26 until Eric revealed it as a Flair vs. Hogan '94 pay-per-view match, highlights bumping WCW another 600,000 viewers. October '98 was a transitional month for Rock, with everything being set and built towards November 15th at Survivor Series, while in the meantime continuing to get more over as a babyface by the week with his reactions on TV and on the road neck and neck with Austin, with the company as a result heavily pushing his new merchandise and potential crossover mainstream appearances, including the first hints of what's to come with him going face-to-face with Austin, to a massive reaction on Heat on October 4th. And Vince McMahon booking him and Austin to team up for the first time on October 12 against Taker and Kane, doing a 4.2 rating and then going unopposed, jumping over 2.1 million viewers to a peak 6.2 rating. Rock worked a series of matches throughout the month, facing strong competition from big WCW main events head-to-head, but still bumping viewers for each one. First gaining over 300,000 viewers to a 4.5 rating in a main event against Taker on October 5, then another 300,000 viewers to a 5.1 rating for a match with D'Lo a day after getting the biggest reaction on the pay-per-view for the People's Elbow, while closing the month in a match with Jaws bumping Raw over 1.4 million viewers. Ken Shamrock was officially cemented as a heel on October 12 with him winning a one-night tournament for the IC title after going over Blackman, Venus and X-Pac in matches drawing between 4.3 to 4.7 quarters, with the Shamrock vs X-Pac rematch the following week drawing a 5. Shamrock's two biggest numbers of the month came on October 5 and 26. First opening Raw's second hour in a match against Kane, gaining over 1 million viewers to a peak 5.3 rating, and then closing the month in the main event I Quit match against Steve Austin, doing a 5.1. The build-up to the Hogan vs. Warrior rematch was in the final stage, with the Warrior Mind Games angle continuing on October 5 and a segment of him showing up in a mirror backstage doing a 4.7 rating, with Hogan an hour earlier cutting a promo to hype up the match. Warrior worked his first TV match in over 2 years the following week, teaming up with Sting for the first time in 12 years against Hogan and Bret, jumping over 800,000 viewers to a peak 5.1 rating, which also beat a loaded tag match on Raw head-to-head with a 5.1 to 4.2 rating margin. Hogan called out Horace in the main event segment on October 19, 6 days from the pay-per-view, revealing that Horace is his nephew before beating him down to send a message to Warrior with him coming out for the go-home angle, and a segment drawing the joint highest rated quarter of the night with a 4.5 rating. as Hogan and Warrior closed the month and their program a day after Halloween Havoc, with Hogan and NWO Hollywood welcoming Horace to the NWO after passing the test, with Warrior coming out an hour later to a big reaction in front of an hometown crowd in Phoenix, taking out Hogan, Bischoff and NWO Hollywood in a segment jumping over 300,000 viewers to a 4.6 rating. Two weeks from a pay-per-view main event against each other, Kane and Undertaker worked high TV matches on October 5th, with Kane against Shamrock and Taker against Rock, gaining combined over 1.5 million viewers to a peak 5.3 and 4.5 ratings. Taker and Kane teamed up in a main event tag match against Austin and Rock on October 12th, doing a 4.2, with them working a pay-per-view main event rematch the following week in a casket match doing a 4.7 rating, while an hour earlier Undertaker and Paul Bearer came out for a promo a day after reuniting and turning heel on Kane to unveil their plans to form the Ministry, with the segment drawing Raw's highest quarter of the night with a 5.2. After Bret Hart turned heel on Sting to officially book their first ever match at Halloween Havoc, Sting and Bret worked a series of main event matches and angles to some of the biggest numbers of the month, with their program proving to lead to major viewership boosts on a weekly basis. A week after the turn, the Wolfpack and Sting arrived looking for Bret Hart all over the backstage area, before finding him to start a brawl which saw Sting picking up and dropping NWO Hollywood's limousine with a forklift in a segment opening big, with WCW in the lead with a 4.6 to 4.1 rating margin. 2 hours later, Bret and Sting were scheduled for their first match on TV in the main event, with Bret returning backstage to lead to a Sting vs. Bret brawl all over the Carolina Coliseum to close the show, with the match along with the unique visual of it all taking place in the backstage area leading to WCW jumping over 800,000 viewers in the overrun to a peak 5.4 rating. Sting came out for a promo the following week calling out Bret and Hogan, setting up a Blade Runners reunion with Sting and Warrior teaming up against Bret and Hogan in the main event tag match drawing a peak 5.1, with Bret and Sting again working the main event spot on October 19th in a Havoc pay-per-view preview match, gaining over 600,000 viewers to another show-high 5 rating, as the following week Sting was written off TV with a knee injury angle until next April, while Bret closed the month main eventing the show in the US title match against Dallas Page doing a 4.3. For the fourth month in a row, Bill Goldberg had the highest rating average in the industry, building up to his title match against Dallas Page at the Halloween Havoc pay-per-view. Since his hyped main event against Sting on September 14th, Goldberg was only used on TV in short sporadic appearances with barely any advertised segments or matches, continuing on October 5th with him doing a run-in to take out the Flock after Page's match against Kanyon, setting up a stare-down with the matching segment jumping over 800,000 viewers to a 4.6 rating. Goldberg worked his first match on Monday night in almost a month against Giant on October 12th, doing a 4.4 rating, which gave WCW its first quarter-hour win of the night with a 4.4 to 4.3. Goldberg and Page shot the final angle for the pay-per-view a week later, with Goldberg interrupting Page's match against Chris Jericho to lead to another confrontation, gaining over 700,000 viewers to a 4.3, setting the stage for the biggest number of the month the following week. Coming off the Halloween Havoc technical issues the night before, WCW made the decision to air the full Goldberg vs. Page pay-per-view match starting just as Raw was going on the air at 9 p.m., with the match ending up breaking all records as even with Raw starting, WCW picked up huge with an additional 1.2 million viewers to an all-time record 7.2 rating, with a 7.2 to 3.3 gap of 3.9 rating points between the shows, also the biggest gap in history. Goldberg, who already held the top two highest-rated opposed quarters in history for his Georgia Dome match with Hogan and the tag match on August 24, added the 7.2 on October 26 to have the entire top three. When it looked like the Steve Austin vs. Vince McMahon program reached its ceiling, Austin and McMahon, along with WWF's out-of-the-box creative team of Russo, Ferraro and McMahon, took things to the next level during the month, with the feud arguably peaking in October '98, with a string of some of the most memorable segments in company history happening back-to-back in an attempt to top the previous one on a weekly basis. Vince McMahon opened October in the hospital a week after the Taker leg-breaking angle, with updates from him hyped throughout Raw, bumping the show over 800,000 viewers to a 4.8 rating for the first segment with Mankind, which also saw the debut of Mr. Socko. 90 minutes later, the announcers went back to Vince for the final comments before Steve Austin attacked him in the hospital to open Raw's main event quarter, drawing a 4.4. Vince was back in the building, arriving in one of his Corvettes the following week, with him leaving the door open for Austin, entering the Nassau Coliseum parking lot driving a cement truck to fill up McMahon's car, before going to the ring for another Austin-McMahon confrontation, picking up over 1.3 million viewers to Raw's over 2-month high 5.9 rating, with Austin also working a tag match in the main event, teaming with Rock against Taker and Kane, doing a 4.2. The next week, a day after McMahon fired Austin to close the pay-per-view, McMahon and Austin were all over Raw in a show-long angle of Austin taking Vince hostage, ending up in the ring at over 11 p.m. with a massive gain of over 1.7 million viewers to a 6.3 rating, closing the month with the official introduction of Shane McMahon as a main TV character, with a hyped documents reveal segment that saw Shane reinstating Austin, along with the first Vince vs. Shane confrontation, gaining over 1.5 million viewers to a peak 5.5 rating, with Austin also working the main event an hour later in an I Quit match against Shamrock, picking up over 800,000 viewers to a 5.1. Scott Steiner took over the retired Hogan as the new leader of NWO Hollywood on November 30, arriving to open the show for the announcement promo, while also working a tag match over 2 hours later, teaming with Horace against Hall and Nash, drawing a peak 4.7 rating. Steiner's perhaps most talked about segment of the month came on November 2, with him almost shooting on J.J. Dillon on TV after being interrupted in his scheduled promo time, leading to him pushing Dillon and walking to the back to end the segment abruptly, while coming back out an hour later to confront Dillon after announcing that he will be fined taking out the announcer's table before going to the ring with Bagwell trying to restrain him, cutting an aggressive promo on WCW management holding him down, as the segment jumped over 400,000 viewers to another show-high 4.2 rating. The three original NWO members all went in different directions in November '98, setting up legit and worked angles in the build to next year, with Hogan only appearing on 2 shows during the month before making mainstream headlines in a publicity stunt of him running for president. Hogan's 2 advertised quarters both drew show-high numbers. First on November 9th, opening the head-to-head quarter for his presidential campaign announcement with Eric Bischoff doing a 4.1 rating, while a week later in a follow-up segment Hogan called out Eric with Hall turning on him to bring out Nash, picking up over 500,000 viewers to a 4.2. Nash, as a result of Hogan taking time off, took over his backstage position of power to start the build to the Starrcade main event against Goldberg, having his first show in the alleged new role on November 23rd with 3 segments with Goldberg and a talked-about match that saw him going over Wrath to end his winning streak, drawing a 4.2 rating. Hall was involved in 3 peak quarters during the month and the highest viewership gain of the 3 with over 1.8 million viewers, as Hall and Nash's biggest number of the month was also WCW's biggest and the only quarter-hour win on Raw during the 5-week period, as the reunion of the Outsiders after months feuding saw the tag match against Steiner and Horace gaining over 900,000 viewers to a 4.7 rating, which beat Raw's 4.6. Goldberg was partially involved in 3 separate programs during the month, closing out the first one on November 9th with him arriving during a Jericho promo and coming out to spear him in an unadvertised appearance during a quarter, drawing a 4 rating. A week later, WCW had one of the most surprising angles of the year as Bam Bam Bigelow jumped from ECW to WCW and called out Goldberg to the ring, leading to a wild pull-apart brawl with the segment and the follow-up of Goldberg demanding Bischoff to give him a match against Bigelow, gaining over 600,000 viewers to a 4.2 rating. The Goldberg vs. Bigelow match, going against a record audience on Raw, ended before it started in 30 seconds, with both making their entrances past 11:02 p.m., with Goldberg getting his Starrcade opponent in Nash on November 23rd. Including a main event against Giant, drawing a 4.3 rating, ending the month in the Starrcade contract signing with Nash and the Wolfpack, while after being called out for a street fight in the last hour with Bigelow kicked out of the building, Goldberg ran out to start a Goldberg-Bigelow parking lot brawl in a quarter, doing a peak 4.7 rating. After the breakup of the Nation, D'Lo Brown and Mark Henry continued to show strong chemistry in and out of the ring, with perhaps their standout performance to date coming on November 30th in a show-long angle on location with Henry going on a date with Chyna after weeks of hype. Henry and D'Lo were involved in several comedic skits all over the show outside in Baltimore, with D'Lo ending up as Henry and Chyna's driver, with the biggest segment of the night coming in a quarter, doing a first-hour high 5.1 rating. Henry and D'Lo were involved in tag matches against the Headbangers and the Brood, with both working singles matches on November 9th bumping Raw over 1 million viewers, with D'Lo in a three-way against Road Dogg and Headbanger match doing a 5 rating, while Henry headlined the show in a hyped match against Rock doing a 5.5. Kane opened the month in a show-long angle of him interfering in matches over the 2 hours after Paul Bearer's turn to join Taker, leading to the main event segment of him setting the cage on fire in a brawl with Taker and Austin doing a peak 6 rating. Taker opened Raw with a 4.3 rating the following week in a match against X-Pac that saw Kane interfering to shoot a fireball on Taker, with Kane also working a match against Edge later in the show jumping over 400,000 viewers to a 5.2 rating, continuing Kane's out-of-control angle with him attempting to set the Brood on fire and attack the production crew a week later. Taker's most memorable show of the month came on November 23rd with him taking the new direction of his character to the next level in the build to the Ministry of Darkness reveal, arriving in a hearse along with Bearer to attack and kidnap Austin in the hospital, leading to the next hour of him driving an unconscious Austin to a cemetery and then a funeral home attempting to embalm him alive, before Kane arrived for the save, with the skits being placed all over Raw's second hour ranging from a 4.6 to 5.4 quarters, closing the month a week later for the follow-up angle of Taker and Bearer locking Austin backstage and attempting to send Kane to a mental institution in a quarter, gaining over 300,000 viewers to a 4.7 rating. Raw on November 2nd started with Shane McMahon coming out after the company hyped throughout the week the possible retirement of Vince with Shane as the new owner, ending up with Vince arriving moments later to confront him and Austin in the opening segment doing a 4.5 rating, while continuing to run through the roster and stuff members over the next 2 hours in the build to him sending Bossman to take out his own crew in a cage in the overrun segment, jumping big to a peak 6 rating. A week later the McMahons were all over the show with everything being set up for the Survivor Series turn, built around a Vince vs. Rock angle in a career-on-the-line match doing a show-high 5.5 rating, with the day after the pay-per-view on November 16th Vince, Shane and Rock opened Raw at record levels with a 5.3 rating for the corporation debut. Shawn Michaels, who has been out of storyline since WrestleMania 14, came back on November 23rd as the new WWF commissioner to go against McMahon and open Raw with a 4.6 rating, setting up Michaels turning heel on DX to join the corporation 2 hours later in the main event doing a 5.3, with the follow-up Michaels vs. X-Pac promo confrontation a week later with both in the ring for the first time since Waltman replaced Michaels in DX in March, picking up over 500,000 viewers to a first-hour high 5.1 rating, with Michaels also out on commentary during the peak quarter of the show 20 minutes later with a 5.7. Mick Foley took a major step to being established as a top main eventer, with Mankind being set up to be McMahon's handpicked champion in a corporate makeover throughout the show on November 9th, while also being given the debuting hardcore belt, with him defending the title for the first time against Shamrock to open Raw's second hour drawing a 5.2 rating. Mankind arrived the day after the Vince turn, with McMahon sending Patterson, Briscoe and Slaughter to find him all over the building, setting up a boiler room brawl between all four during Raw's main event quarter doing a 5.5. The next 2 weeks between November 23 to 30 saw Mankind working 2 matches at the top of the hour which both drew show-high numbers. First a 3-way against Shamrock and Bossman for the hardcore title, gaining over 600,000 viewers to a 5.4 rating, and then a Mankind vs Bossman ladder match picking up over 900,000 viewers to a 5.7. After being directionless in WCW at the start of the year as Ray Traylor, Big Bossman returned big as McMahon's enforcer to be established as one of Raw's most featured performers along with Ken Shamrock in the corporation. Bossman and Shamrock started the month bumping Raw, combined over 2 million viewers, with Shamrock working a match against Rock doing a 5.3 and Bossman being sent by McMahon to punish his screw in a cage after bailing out on him the previous week doing a 6. Both were part of the same quarter on November 9th, with Shamrock working against Mankind and Bossman having a promo confrontation with Austin in the build to their pay-per-view match, both doing a 5.2 rating, with them wrestling against each other the following week to open Raw's second hour in a match jumping over 700,000 viewers to the peak quarter of the night 5.8 rating, with the post-match seeing Vince coming out to recruit Shamrock to the corporation and establish Bossman and Shamrock as the group's main enforcers. Bossman and Shamrock continued to do strong numbers at the top of the hour quarter, with 2 peak ratings in the next 2 weeks for a Bossman Shamrock and Mankind 3-way match doing a 5.4, and a Bossman vs Mankind hardcore title ladder match bumping Raw around 1 million viewers to a 5.7. With the focus of McMahon shifted in the build to the corporation swerve, Steve Austin's main feuds during the month were the returning Bossman and the continuation of the Taker program, making 2 appearances alongside Shane on November 2nd to open the show and then running in for the save in the overrun to end it in a brawl with Bossman, Taker and Kane jumping over 1.4 million viewers to a peak 6 rating. A week later Austin hyped the Survivor Series tournament match against Bossman in a promo doing a 5.2 rating, while on November 16th in one of the most hyped Raw shows in history coming off the pay-per-view, Austin came out to confront the corporation with a title match contract to set up an Austin vs Rock WWF title main event in front of a rabid crowd at the Rupp Arena, with the match peaking at a record 7.3 rating to lead Raw to its highest ever opposed rating with a 5.5. Austin shot a rare non-televised house show angle on November 23 with him collapsing in San Jose from Taker's shovel shot to lead to a show-long angle of him being attacked in the hospital, while coming back the following week to take out Taker and Bearer, building up to a main event segment of him and Kane throwing Bearer down the sewer outside the Baltimore arena, picking up over 500,000 viewers to a 5.1 rating, and then going unopposed in the overrun for the conclusion of the segment, gaining over 1.5 million viewers more to a 6.5. Months before Rock was about to make his television debut in '96, The prediction from key figures in the business was that this is the company's next WrestleMania headliner in 3 to 5 years. Exactly 2 years from his first appearance November '98 saw Rock taking the top spot in the industry as the WWF champion heading into WrestleMania 15, with the payoff of a greatest storyline in history contender establishing him on top of the drawing list for the first time in his career while in the process bringing the entire company up a level in every aspect of business to officially enter the peak of the boom period. Rock started November in a match against Shamrock with Vince McMahon getting the Survivor Series build up into overdrive, putting Rock's tournament spot on the line in a match, gaining over 600,000 viewers to Raw's peak quarter 5.3 rating. A week later, 6 days from the pay-per-view Rock vs. McMahon was taken one step further, with Vince putting Rock's career on the line in the main event against Mark Henry, jumping over 500,000 viewers to a peak 5.5 rating in the overrun that also saw Rock playing out McMahon heading into Sunday, as November 16, a day after months of angles culminated with the coronation of Rock as the corporate champion. Raw shattered every record in Monday Night War's history as Rock's promo explanation and the follow-up of Austin coming out to set up the main event saw Raw already at a 5.6 rating. Less than 2 hours later, Rock vs. Austin in front of one of the hottest crowds in history saw the match jumping huge with over 2.2 million viewers to a record 7.3 rating, the highest peak ever recorded on a Raw broadcast to date. Rock defended the title again in the next 2 Raw main events, first on November 23 against X-Pac, gaining over 900,000 viewers to a 5.3 rating, while a week later Rock took out Mankind in his ladder match against Bossman doing a 5.7, before going over Al Snow to bump Raw's final quarter over 500,000 viewers to a 5.1. As Rock ended November '98 having the highest average rating, most peak segments and most viewers gained in the industry. Scott Steiner opened December in a match against Scott Hall in front of over 32,000 at the Astrodome doing a 3.7 rating, with Luger and the Wolfpack coming out for the save to set up an angle for next week, with Steiner and Bagwell calling out Luger in the main event quarter after Steiner's match against Van Hammer, picking up over 300,000 viewers, with Scott and Buff trying to recruit Luger to NWO Hollywood, offering him a black and white shirt doing a 4.1. Steiner and Bagwell came out in front of another huge crowd at St. Louis doing a Mark McGuire parody, with the segment spiking the show from a 3.2 to a peak 4.2 rating, closing the month with Steiner going over Conan to win the U.S. title in a match, jumping over 500,000 viewers to a 4.7. The build-up to the Goldberg vs. Nash Starrcade main event saw WCW on its highest attendance run in wrestling TV history, with 3 stadium shows in a month drawing over 100,000 people. December 7 saw WCW promoting a Goldberg vs. Bigelow main event throughout the show that ended up with a bait-and-switch finish, as Nash promised in a promo during the first hour that the match won't happen, with all 3 coming out with less than 5 minutes left on the show to end in a minute brawl in a quarter doing a 3.7. After the last few weeks of not delivering the advertised main events, WCW delivered the Goldberg-Nash-Bigelow three-way match in the main event on December 14th, picking up over 900,000 viewers in the overrun to a peak 4.9 rating, which went neck and neck with Raw's 5, while in the build to the match 2 hours before it, Scott Hall taunted Bigelow backstage to start a four-way brawl with Nash and Goldberg running in to set up the main event minutes before Raw went on the air, as the backstage brawl recap also bumped Nitro over 500,000 viewers to a 4.2. Goldberg vs. Hall headlined the Starrcade Go Home show in front of a record crowd at the TWA Dome in what ended up the final match in the Goldberg streak run, starting already past 11 p.m. jumping over 700,000 viewers to a 4 rating, while a day after the pay-per-view Nash's title win follow-up promo challenging Goldberg to a rematch at the Georgia Dome gained over 700,000 viewers to the peak quarter of the show 4.8 rating, which beat Raw's 4.3, as well as Bigelow and Hall working singles matches on the night with Bigelow vs. Disco doing a 4.1. While Hall's promo on the Nash-Goldberg finish and match with Bryan Adams saw WCW jump to a 4.7. Ric Flair and Eric Bischoff took their feud's intensity to the next level, heading into and coming off Starrcade with some of the most heated segments in wrestling history, drawing the most peak ratings in WCW during the month with big viewership gains throughout. Flair opened Nitro's third hour on December 7th, cutting an intense hype promo on Bischoff, drawing a show-high 4.3 rating, with one of the most talked about angles of the year happening the following week with Flair chasing Bischoff before coming back to the ring for another wild promo that ended with him holding his chest and taken out of the building with an alleged heart attack, as the segment, which took place in the final quarter of the unopposed hour, jumped big with over 1.3 million viewers to a 5.9 rating, with Bischoff's out-of-character update promo 2 hours later also gaining over 500,000 viewers to a 4.1. Flair and Bischoff were all over the show 6 days from the pay-per-view in several angles, doing the 3 most watched quarters on the night, with the first one placed in the crossover segment at 9 p.m. with Flair and the Horsemen arriving at the stadium mid-Eric's promo, with Flair running to the ring promising to get him tonight in a segment doing a 4.2 rating, which beat Raw's 4, making it Nitro's first opening quarter victory in almost 2 months, as Flair and Bischoff were back out an hour later with Flair cutting the final pay-per-view selling promo doing another show-high 4.2. Things were heating up further following Starrcade, with Flair cutting one of the most memorable promos in his career to challenge Eric to the rematch in a company versus career match for the main event, with the match which also saw Randy Savage making his TV return after 6 months out, jumping huge in the overrun with over 2 million viewers to a 6.2 rating, the highest recorded peak rating of the month for both companies. Due to a mixture of injuries and storyline reasons, Steve Austin and Undertaker only appeared on one Raw show during December, with Austin out with a combination of a pulled muscle and a stomach virus suffered while in the UK for the Capital Carnage pay-per-view, and Taker getting a few weeks off after working through injuries in the build to the Ministry of Darkness reveal to start '99. Austin and Taker's only Raw show came on December 7th in the build to the Rock Bottom pay-per-view, having 2 segments on the night, including one of the most talked about angles of the year to close the show. Austin opened the second hour hyping the Buried Alive match before Taker responded burning his symbol in a segment doing a 4.7 rating, with both involved in the main event tag match with Rock and Mankind doing a show-high 5.6 rating, as the big talking point came minutes later in the overrun with Taker putting Austin on the symbol in a crucifixion pose going unopposed to peak at a 6.9 rating. The Outlaws started the month teasing going corporate and turning heel on DX, ending up in a swerve of them turning on the corporation an hour later before taking part in a parody of them the following week playing Vince and Shane, along with them facing Bossman and Shamrock in a tag titles match drawing a near show-high 5.4 rating. Road Dogg and Billy Gunn worked high-profile singles matches in the final 2 weeks of December. First with Gunn vs Shamrock doing a 4.9 and Road Dogg vs Bossman doing a 4.7, with both involved in Raw's final 2 matches of '98 with Gunn vs Kane doing a 5.2, and Road Dogg vs Mankind doing a show-high 5.5. The McMahons opened Raw's second hour on December 14 to officially kick off the build to the '99 Royal Rumble pay-per-view, drawing Austin at number 1 while announcing that Vince McMahon will wrestle his first ever match in the Rumble in a segment drawing a 5.3 rating, while on the same night Vince challenged Mankind to a street fight outside the building with the brawl jumping to another 5.3. Vince put Shane in charge of Raw on December 21 while going to the gym, with Shane opening the show to set up a match against Foley in his in-ring debut, as the Shane vs Mankind match which took place over an hour later gained over 1 million viewers to a quarter-high 5.4 rating, with Vince returning for the main event promising a Christmas surprise which saw Kane joining the corporation doing a 5.8. As Vince closed out '98 with a main event segment of him firing Shawn Michaels doing a 5.5, and a skit of him and Shane training in the gym for his in-ring debut at the Rumble jumping over 700,000 viewers to a 4.6. Shamrock and Bossman continued to do strong numbers in tag and singles matches throughout the month as part of the corporation, opening December in a tag match against Triple H and X-Pac doing a 5.3 rating, while a week later in the Rock Bottom pay-per-view rematch, Shamrock and Bossman beat the Outlaws to win the tag belts in a tag match doing the second highest quarter of the show 5.4 rating. Bossman and Shamrock worked singles matches for the final 2 weeks of the year bumping Raw around 3 million viewers. First with Shamrock vs Billy Gunn jumping over 700,000 viewers to a 4.9, while Bossman vs Road Dogg picked up over 400,000 viewers to a 4.7, closing the year with Bossman against X-Pac doing a 4.6 and Shamrock vs Triple H jumping big to a 5.4. After months out with knee injury, Triple H returned full-time in December with the DX vs Corporation feud, one of the main features throughout every show during the month. Hunter X-Pac and Chyna opened December 7 calling out the Outlaws after a swerve of them joining the corporation to bring out Michaels with them, while working a tag match in the co-main event of Raw against Bossman and Shamrock gaining over 700,000 viewers to a 5.3 rating. with the full DX crew opening the show again the following week along with Jason Sensation in a corporation parody, opening Raw at record levels with a 5.5 rating. X-Pac and Hunter were in the main event spot again on December 21st in a tag match against Rock and Test doing a show-high 5.8 rating, with both working singles matches the following week with X-Pac against Bossman doing a 4.6 while Triple H vs Shamrock at the top of the hour jumped big with over 1.2 million viewers to a 5.4. Shawn Michaels and his new commissioner role was back in the main TV storylines for the first time since March, being indirectly involved in every major angle on the show either on the microphone or at ringside. Michaels' first 2 weeks of the month saw him opening Raw and promo confrontations with DX, first going face-to-face with Triple H for the first time since the DX split, saying that he made him when he was a nobody before their run. While a week later Michaels came out with Rock to respond to the DX parody with Jason Sensation playing Michaels' role in the skit, with both segments doing near-record numbers opening with 5.5 ratings. Michaels started the potential babyface turn of him jumping back to DX on December 21st with him preventing the corporation from helping Shane against Mankind, setting up the main event confrontation the following week with a Vince McMahon announcement waiting for Shawn's arrival throughout the show, ending up with Vince firing him and Michaels officially turning babyface with a superkick to lay him out and close 98 in the overrun doing a 5.5 rating. Mankind's WWF title chase against Rock and the Corporation went to the next level in December as the main program on Raw during the month, with Vince putting multiple obstacles in the build to the title win on January 4th, booking him in a no-holds-barred match against Kane on December 14th doing a 4.9 rating, with Mankind interrupting McMahon's promo to challenge him to a match later tonight, setting up Mankind vs Vince along with Patterson and Briscoe outside the building, gaining over 700,000 viewers in total to a 5.3. A week later Shane challenged Mankind to a match as revenge for Vince, with Foley taunting him throughout in a match jumping over a million viewers to a quarter-high 5.4 rating, closing the month in a hardcore title match against Road Dogg in the Raw main event jumping over 400,000 viewers to a 5.5. Rock continued his run on top in December, being involved in all 4 peak segments of the show during the month, starting on December 7th with the Raw main event 6 days from the Rock Bottom pay-per-view, teaming up with Taker against Austin and Mankind jumping over 400,000 viewers to a show-high 5.6 rating. A week later Rock came out in Raw's opening segment in front of over 19,000 at the Tacoma Dome to respond to the DX Corporation parody, doing a parody of his own with Hogan, Savage, Flair and Bret catchphrase imitations to start Raw with a 5.5 rating, the highest rated opening segment in show history, while nearly 2 hours later during the final quarter of the show running in for the save during the McMahon-Mankind parking lot brawl along with a title match against Triple H doing a 5.3, with Raw overall despite both Austin and Taker being written off TV, drawing its 3rd highest rating in history with a 5.2. Rock continued with big numbers for the main event on December 21st with a tag match along with the debuting Test against X-Pac and Hunter picking up over 800,000 viewers to a peak 5.8 rating, while also being involved in the highest rated quarter of the night, running in to take out Mankind against Shane doing a 5.4, closing the month in 98 in general, doing commentary for the final Raw match of the year, making his first appearance of the night at 10:50 p.m. for the Mankind vs. Road Dogg Hardcore title match, gaining over 400,000 viewers to another show-high 5.5 to close the year on top of the list with massive momentum heading into 1999. Ric Flair started 1998 in a hyped program with Bret Hart, leading to their build-up promo segments being some of the highest on the show on a weekly basis on the way to the sold-out pay-per-view main event. Flair's final TV appearance in his original run came on March 9 in a match against Curt Hennig, picking up over 700,000 viewers to a 5.2 rating, with Flair continuing to be in the headlines while off television in the weeks and months following, with high-profile lawsuits between Bischoff and the company, building up to his return on September 14 for one of the most memorable segments of his career, gaining over 1.3 million viewers to the peak quarter of the night 5.4 rating, with the Flair vs. Bischoff feud consistently bumping viewers in the lead-up to Starrcade as one of WCW's highest-drawing programs of the year, culminating in the final show of '98 with the first televised Flair vs. Bischoff match jumping to a big 6.2 rating to close the year. Flair's averages while working were some of the highest in the business, but he only made sporadic appearances in the first 4 months of the year due to the contract dispute with the company before returning full-time in September to December. For the first 6 months of the year, Randy Savage was the joint top-drawing performer in the industry, with him having the highest rating average and most viewers gained for his segments before taking time off for knee surgery in mid-June. Savage, in an in-house NWO feud against Hogan, broke new milestones for WCW on a weekly basis to start '98 in the highest-drawing program in the business, with the company peaking in every department, leading to the Savage vs. NWO segments routinely breaking the record for the most watched quarters in history, starting on January 26 with Savage arriving to the building to confront the NWO, bumping the show to an all-time peak 5.3 rating, with the biggest number of the year to date coming on April 20 with Savage vs. Hogan headlining Nitro for the title to shatter every cable TV record in history with a big 6.5 rating. Savage's final program in '98 saw him bumping viewers for several promo segments against Roddy Piper in the build to a Savage vs. Bret Hart match, before making his return after over 6 months out to close the year with a new look during the Flair-Bischoff match, as with him written off TV just before WCW had 2 of its highest-rated months in July and August. Savage would have been on track to be at or near the top of the list by the end of the year. Mick Foley and Kane teamed up for 4 months of their year in a feud against Austin and Taker, with their biggest number during the run coming against each other, with the first ever Hell in a Cell match on TV picking up over 1.3 million viewers to a 5.3 rating. Foley had the highest average head-to-head rating in the WWF in February on the back of a big segment that saw the Outlaws pushing Foley and Funk off the stage in a dumpster, drawing a 4 rating, which at the time was Raw's highest ever opposed rating. Kane, following the Taker feud, went into a title program against Austin in June that saw him headline the highest rated draw to date on June 28 with the Kane vs. Austin main event drawing a near-Raw record 5.9 rating. With Kane turning babyface and being forced to join the corporation, Mankind in a feud with Rock and McMahon went to the next level at the end of the year with some of the highest rated numbers on every show. Scott Hall's first 3 months of '98 saw him in the top 5 drawing performers in the business, building to singles pay-per-view matches against Larry Zbyszko and a title match against Sting, with his last appearance for the next few months before taking time off for personal issues, coming on the special Spring Break show on March 16 with him and Nash coming out drunk in a comedic segment with Giant. While off television, the NWO split storyline saw leaders Hogan and Nash legitimately pushing for Hall to come back on their side, with Hall returning big in July with his biggest individual month of the year, averaging a 5 rating with 3-month quarter highs 5.4 ratings in the first 2 weeks for first-time ever matches against Goldberg and Hogan. The second half of '98 saw Hall in a drinking angle, playing off legit issues going on at the time, going to the next level on a worked shoot intervention segment on September 14 that saw Bischoff and Nash trying to get Hall to the back, jumping over 700,000 viewers to a 4.8 rating to open the Outsiders feud. Undertaker returned on March 2 to kick off the build-up to WrestleMania 14, with the Kane feud's biggest drawing angles coming after the show in a series of segments building to the first Inferno match, including 2 peak 4.9 ratings in April and May. Taker's biggest program of the year saw him in a 3-month build-up with Austin to SummerSlam, with his biggest month coming in the final build-up to the pay-per-view in August with a 5.3 rating average and a 5 million viewer gain, setting up Taker and Kane teaming up for the first time in the year, with Taker's run from September to November seeing his segments bumping Raw over 7 million viewers, closing the year turning heel on Kane to rejoin Paul Bearer and start the build to the Ministry reveal, with his last appearance in '98 also one of the most talked about, with him involved in a main event tag match with Rock against Austin and Mankind doing a peak 5.6 rating, before jumping over 1.4 million viewers for the post-match, with Taker putting Austin on a symbol in a crucifixion-like angle drawing a 6.9. After months of behind-the-scenes issues between the Nash and Hall to the Hogan and Bischoff camps, catching fire with Eric's firing of Sean Waltman in March, Nash took over the NWO Wolfpack to go on a top singles run for the first time in 2 years. Nash's first world title match since losing the WWF title over 2 years earlier came on April 6 in a TV main event against Sting, jumping over 1.6 million viewers to a record a post-quarter 5.8 rating. The Wolfpack peaked in the summer of '98 with some of the highest merchandise numbers in history, with the Wolfpack to NWO Hollywood feud splitting to 2 main singles programs with Nash vs. Hall and Sting vs. Bret, building to the first Outsiders match at the Havoc pay-per-view on October 25. Nash's career took a different turn in mid-November, as after years of contributing ideas and being involved in the process, Nash has officially joined the creative committee before taking over as the head of the group. setting up the Starrcade main event with the Nash vs. Goldberg build-up starting on Nash's first show in the alleged new backstage role on November 23. Rock went through 3 stages throughout the year that took him from a potential superstar in January to a top-tier headliner by November, with the first one coming in March and April with him starting many of the elements that will turn into iconic features of his character, along with taking over as the leader of the nation with him drawing Raw's peak rating of the night in back-to-back weeks for a main event against Austin and the Turn on Farouk segment between March 23 to 30 drawing 4.2 and 4.3 ratings. The second stage to the top came in July and August with Rock in addition to the usual major heat starting to get mixed reactions from the crowds, and going to the next level as a viewership mover with him bumping Raw over 8 million viewers for his quarters during the period including the most peak segments in the WWF with 5 out of the 8 weeks in the build-up to SummerSlam. Rock's transformation was completed in November with the lead-up to Survivor Series against McMahon and the coronation of the corporate champion, including breaking every Raw record in history the following night with the highest overall rating in show history and the highest peak ever recorded on a Raw broadcast for his first title defense against Austin drawing a 7.3 rating, with Rock from that point on topping every chart in the industry with the highest rating average, most viewers gained and most show high numbers with him peaking 7 out of the 9 Raw shows in November and December. After months of his reactions growing on a weekly basis, Bill Goldberg less than a year after his debut was already a legit difference maker in every aspect, with his first big drawing test coming on April 20 with his first title match against Raven being placed to start in the crossover segment at 9 p.m. just when Raw was going on the air, leading to WCW blitzing Raw with a 5.7 to 3.7 margin, with the 5.7 rating also the highest ever in the first quarter. Goldberg's fastest rise in history led to WCW building the promoted biggest TV show in company history on him in front of a record hometown crowd at the Georgia Dome with 2 first-time ever matches against Hall and Hogan bumping WCW over 3 million viewers on the night, with the Goldberg-Hogan match breaking all cable TV records with a 6.9 rating, taking Goldberg's status to the next level as a proven megastar with him having the highest rating average in the industry for the next 4 months between July to October, the longest streak on top of any performer during the year. Goldberg's biggest number of the year was also the biggest in history to date, with the replay of the Goldberg vs. Page Havoc match on October 26 drawing the highest rated quarter in history with a 7.2 rating and in the process beating Raw by a record 3.9 rating points. Due to the nature of his character with him usually not going long enough to fill a full quarter hour or have multiple promo segments a show, Goldberg's peak numbers and viewers gained circumstantially took a hit compared to other top stars in his position, but with him ending the year with the 2 highest rated quarters in history and the joint highest rating average in the business. Coming off winning the WCW title at Starrcade '97, Sting was back working full-time in the lead-up to the rematch against Hogan at Super Brawl, with the build seeing Sting team up with Savage Giant and Luger against the three original NWO members in a series of tag matches, breaking records almost on a weekly basis in the 5.3 to 5.7 rating range. Sting's two biggest TV title matches came against Page and Nash, with both drawing show-high numbers. First with him opening the head-to-head quarter on March 23 with a 5.4 rating against Page, and 2 weeks later headlining Nitro in a first-ever match against Nash, drawing a record of post 5.8 rating. Sting joined the Wolfpack after 3 hours of hype in the main event segment on June 1, drawing a peak 4.3 rating, with him involved in Wolfpack tag matches and promo segments throughout the summer until moving into a singles program with Bret Hart. Sting and Bret headlined TV in 3 out of the 4 weeks during October, peaking the show in each one with ratings between 5 to 5.4 and over 2 million viewers gained, with Sting, despite being written off TV in an injury angle the following week and not having multiple promoted segments at the start of the year, still ended every drawing category near the top of the list. With the first signs of Vince McMahon's drawing power as an on-screen character coming from the intrigue of the follow-up of Montreal in November '97, Vince's integration into regular TV storylines in March '98 had immediate effects, with him in the span of 2 weeks involved in Raw's two highest-rated opposed quarters to date, with 4.5 and 4.3 ratings for segments with Michaels, Tyson and Austin. Weeks later, Vince's status went from a strong TV character to a legit difference-maker, with Raw built on his in-ring debut against Austin, ending WCW's 83-week winning streak with the McMahon-Austin angle, breaking the all-time Monday Night Wars record with a 6 rating. After being Raw's most prominent character for the rest of the year by tying all the top programs together, Vince's biggest month of the year came in October, for arguably the peak of the McMahon-Austin program, with Vince having the most viewers gained in the business for his segments, with a massive total of almost 6 million viewers in addition to the highest rating average in the company. After starting the year as a potential WWF megastar to counter the established names on WCW television, Steve Austin ended the year as one of the biggest difference makers the industry has ever seen, with him heading the company's on-screen turnaround throughout '98. While Austin was able to attract a large percentage of the WWF audience to his segments for months prior, he still didn't have the mass reach of the WCW headliners, as even the hyped Austin Tyson segment, drawing a 4.7 unopposed rating, was outdrawn by an Hogan vs. Giant match going against Raw competition on the same night. April '98, with the official start of the Austin McMahon program, was the breakthrough, as in the first 2 weeks of the month Austin had the two most watched segments of his career, with a 5.6 for a segment of him teasing going corporate, and a week later an all-time record 6 rating for a promoted match against McMahon, combined bumping Raw over 2.5 million viewers. Austin took the top spot as the highest-drawing performer in the business in June '98 for the first time in his career, leading Raw to its most dominant month to date with 5 wins in a row, with him peaking 4 out of the 5 shows during the month, while starting the Highway to Hell build-up with Taker in July and August with an over 5 rating average. The Austin-McMahon feud went to the next level in September and October, with all-time memorable segments coming one after another, with Austin getting his next WrestleMania opponent in mid-November with Rock's turn, as Austin throughout the 3-month period gained a huge 14 million viewers for his segments and matches, with the biggest one coming on November 16 against Rock, picking up over 2.3 million viewers to a record 7.3 rating. with Austin ending one of the biggest years for a wrestler in history with the highest viewership gain and joint most peak segments in the business. With the rise of Austin followed by the explosion of Goldberg and Rock throughout different points of the year, when 1998 ended, Hulk Hogan still held 5 out of the top 6 highest-rated segments in Monday Night War's history. As for the majority of 98, when put in a strong position to draw, nobody reached a bigger audience than Hogan. Hogan's 5 biggest numbers all came against different opponents, with a 6.4 rating for Warrior's WCW debut segment on August 17, followed by 3 6.5 ratings for a replay of the Rodman Malone Bash at the Beach match, a tag match with Giant against Goldberg and Nash on August 24, and a main event title match against Randy Savage on April 20. With the biggest number coming on July 6 against Goldberg, drawing an all-time record 6.9 rating, combined bumping the show over 11 million viewers. After a slower than usual June with WCW still recovering from the previous month of preemptions, Hogan rebounded big in July and August with the most viewers gained for his segments in the history of weekly wrestling television, gaining over 12 million viewers while peaking 7 out of the 8 shows during the run. Hogan made an appearance on 33 Night Raw shows during the year, with him involved in the highest-rated segment of the night in 23 shows out of the 33, by far the highest percentage of any performer in the industry, as despite cooling off by the end of the year and taking time off with him getting big mainstream coverage for a publicity stunt of him running for president, Hogan ended 1998 as the overall highest-drawing performer in the business.